The clearer you see, the more vulnerable you become. This is not a piece of philosophy. This is scientific fact. For more than half a century, psychologists and neuroscientists have proven some people are born with brains that process the world at a level that is too deep, too fast, too different from the majority. They are not delusional, they are not hallucinating, they just see more. And that very fact makes them the most dangerous people for the stability of society and for their own safety. In 1969, psychologist Paul Ekman conducted a series of experiments. He recorded thousands of frames of human faces in different emotional states. The result? In less than a quarter of a second, the face reveals a genuine expression, and then it disappears. He called them micro-expressions. Most people never notice, but a small group is different. They see it immediately. A fleeting glance, a trembling lip corner, a tightening facial muscle. For them, everything becomes data. Within 200 milliseconds, they know you are lying. They know you are sad while forcing a smile. They know you are angry even if your mouth says, "I'm fine." Ekman's research has been applied in training by the FBI and the CIA, but for an individual, this ability is not just an advantage, it is a burden. Because seeing the truth does not always bring safety. Seeing the truth often means you become the target. It does not stop at facial expressions. In the 1990s, Italian neuroscientist Giacomo Rizzolatti discovered another mechanism: mirror neurons. When you see someone in pain, your brain reacts as if you yourself are in pain. Some people have mirror neuron systems that fire abnormally strong. That turns them into living emotional receivers. They don't just know someone else is sad, they feel that sadness inside their own body. They don't just hear a sigh, they feel their own chest grow heavy. Science calls this neural empathy. Jung called it the dangerous blurring between me and the other. It may sound noble, but in reality, it leaves them drained. After every encounter, they return home with a mind that no longer feels like their own. And there is another mechanism, even more dangerous. It is prediction error, a theory developed by neuroscientist Carl Friston. Our brain does not just record reality, it constantly compares reality with its internal prediction model. When there is a mismatch, an alarm signal fires. Most people ignore it. They don't notice inconsistencies in a story. They don't notice when the eyes don't match the words. But those who see more cannot ignore it. Their brain is like an oversensitive radar. A sentence sounds fine, but the breathing rhythm is off. A bright smile, but the eyes are empty. A cheerful party, but they know someone there wants to disappear. This is not vague intuition, this is measurable neural activity. Some brains are wired to detect inconsistencies, and those who carry such brains live in a world where contradictions appear everywhere. And here lies the paradox. While science calls it insight, a sudden breakthrough of perception, Jung warned living in a constant state of insight is a danger. Researcher Gary Klein, in his book Seeing What Others Don't, showed that insight often comes from three paths: seeing contradictions, connecting things that seem unrelated, or erupting in desperation when no way out is left. Insight saves lives, creates inventions, and decodes mysteries. But if you live in that state all the time, your brain never rests. You will constantly see contradictions, constantly connect, constantly perceive. That is no longer an advantage. That is torture. Modern science has confirmed what Jung once warned. There is a small group of people who see more than others. They see hidden expressions. They sense the deepest emotions. They detect contradictions the moment they flicker. And because of that, they are placed in danger. Seeing more clearly does not make you happier. It only means you will have to pay a greater price. Up next, I will show you 5 behavioral signs that reveal if you belong to this group. And if you recognize yourself in them, stay until the end of the video, because Jung left behind a survival path meant specifically for you. There are certain behaviors that seem ordinary, but when placed side by side, they reveal a kind of perception that Jung called dangerous. If you recognize yourself in these, chances are you belong to the group of people who always see more than what others want to hide. The first sign: you detect contradictions immediately. Others may be convinced by sweet words and bright smiles, but you are not. In the very first moment, you sense the unease. Words and body language do not match. A reassuring voice, but trembling hands. A radiant smile, but eyes still wet. This is the type of brain that is hypersensitive to prediction error signals, described by neuroscientists. When even the smallest detail does not match the bigger picture, your alarm system instantly activates. Mathematician Alan Turing is the clearest historical example. While the entire world was stuck with the Enigma code, Turing spotted contradictions in the repeated structure of the machine. To see contradiction is to see the exit. But in social life, seeing contradictions means you rarely fully trust any mask, and that sets you apart from the majority. The second sign: you see patterns others overlook. It is no coincidence that some people can predict outcomes from small details. Jung called this the manifestation of a superior intuitive function, a type of mind that sees the big picture from scattered fragments. In history, Abraham Lincoln is an example. He saw patterns in American politics and society during the 19th century, predicting the eruption of the Civil War from fragments most denied. Modern science explains this through the mechanism of pattern recognition. Certain brains are wired to detect order hidden within chaos. It sounds like a strength, but imagine living every day unable to switch it off. You enter a conversation, and instead of enjoying it, you start seeing the collapse pattern of that relationship. You hear a plan, and you clearly see it will fail. You attend a party, and while others laugh, you already notice the cracks forming in people's eyes. The third sign: you sense true emotions behind masks. Many people believe they can hide sadness, anger, or envy, but for you, those masks are transparent. You read the truth in the eyes, in the breath, in the pauses between words. Writer Virginia Woolf is a prime example. She was so sensitive that she absorbed not only words, but also the emotional states behind them. But this excessive sensitivity contributed to her mental breakdowns. Research by Paul Ekman shows that micro-expressions, fleeting expressions lasting less than half a second, are where the truth leaks out. And you, if you belong to this group, don't need machines to see them. The problem is, when you see too many truths behind masks, it becomes hard to trust social performances, and the truth often becomes too heavy to carry alone. The fourth sign: you absorb more than you want. There are days when you leave a meeting feelings that are not your own. Others feel relieved after unloading their burdens, but you carry their emotions home. Jung called this participation mystique, when the boundary between me and the other becomes blurred. Inventor Nikola Tesla once described his extreme sensitivity. He heard sounds others could not hear, perceived lights as unbearably bright, and was so sensitive that even the presence of people exhausted him. Tesla lived much of his life in solitude, precisely because his brain and body absorbed more than they could handle. Research on mirror neurons shows that some brains have empathy so strong they experience other people's emotions as their own. That may be why you feel drained after conversations, even when you hardly speak. The fifth sign: you cannot stand superficiality. While others can enjoy small talk, you experience it as mental torture. Small talk makes you suffocate. Relationships based on surfaces leave you lonelier than being alone. Writer Franz Kafka lived in this state. He avoided social life almost entirely, and his works constantly exposed the artificial structures of modern society. For people like Kafka, superficiality is not just boring, but dangerous to psychological integrity. Research by Daniel Kahneman on System 1 and System 2 also shows some people cannot accept shallow thinking because their brains constantly force them to dig deeper. For them, the surface is never enough. If you recognize yourself in one or more of these signs, it does not make you abnormal. It only proves that your brain processes the world at a level most people cannot endure. Jung warned, it is both a strength and a double-edged sword. If these signs make you recognize yourself, Hit subscribe because there are many more truths from Jung and modern science that most of the world is not ready to hear, but you need to know. When a person carries the ability to see too much, the consequences are not just discomfort or exhaustion. Jung warned of 3 dangers, and they appear in escalating levels. From minor clashes in society to the dissolution of the self. The first danger: disrupting collective illusions. Every community survives on shared illusions. We agree to overlook the truth in order to maintain stability. Families keep secrets to preserve peace. Companies close their eyes to mistakes to keep operating. Society chooses simple beliefs rather than facing complex reality. But those with superior perception cannot pretend. They see the cracks, they point out contradictions, and that truth shakes the foundation of the collective. History provides a clear example. Socrates. He did not use force, he simply asked questions, but each question shattered an illusion that Athens clung to. In the end, he was sentenced to death for corrupting the youth. In reality, Socrates' crime was daring to see what the collective did not want to see. In modern language, Gary Klein calls this the clash between insight and error reduction. Insight creates change, but most organizations and societies choose to reduce errors to preserve stability rather than accept new truths. That is why people with too much insight are often seen as troublemakers, even though in reality they are only reflecting the truth. The second danger: isolation. When you repeatedly see what others do not want to see, their natural reaction is to exclude you. It's not a conspiracy, but a defense mechanism. If you are the mirror that exposes darkness, the easiest way for others to escape the discomfort is to shatter the mirror. Poet Emily Dickinson is the proof. She lived most of her life in a small room, with little contact, almost never appearing in public. Her poems carried sensitivity and depth far ahead of her time, but instead of being embraced, she chose to hide herself because society had no place for such a different vision. Jung called this the consequence of a superior function. When one psychological function develops too far, it no longer connects easily with the collective. The one who carries it is separated, not because they want to, but because society cannot absorb such difference. Isolation is not just being alone. Isolation is the feeling of living in a different reality. You laugh when others laugh, but inside, you know the real reason is not funny. You sit in a crowded room, but it feels as if you're living in another dimension. The third danger: dissolution of identity. This is the most dangerous stage. When you absorb too many emotions, too many contradictions, too many truths, the boundary between you and others begins to vanish. Jung called this state participation mystique, a kind of psychological blurring where I and the other merge. It may sound like ultimate empathy, but in reality, it is slow destruction. Playwright and actor Antonin Artaud is a vivid example. He was so sensitive to the world that he lost the ability to distinguish which thoughts were his and which were echoes from the collective. His life ended in a psychiatric hospital after decades of living in a dissolved identity. In Jung's language, this is the risk of annihilation, the destruction of the self. You no longer know which thoughts are yours, you no longer distinguish which fears belong to others and which are your own. You become a channel for the collective unconscious, but you lose your individual soul. These 3 dangers form a slippery slope. At first, you only accidentally disrupt an illusion. Then you find yourself isolated, and finally, if there is no stopping point, your identity dissolves. Jung emphasized this is not a fictional scenario. This is a psychological law observed throughout history. From philosophers, poets, scientists to artists, those who see too much often pay a heavy price. Ask yourself, why do you see things others never notice? Is it a talent or just extreme sensitivity? Carl Jung had a concept to explain this: the superior function. According to Jung, the human psyche is divided into 4 main functions: thinking, feeling, sensation, and intuition. In each person, usually one function stands out and the others balance to maintain stability. But in a rare few individuals, the superior function develops to an extreme. It becomes the only lens through which they view the world. If that function is intuition, you live in a state Jung called differentiated intuition. You no longer just sense what is obvious. You see hidden patterns. You connect events that seem unrelated. You detect contradictions others overlook. For the majority, this comes as a fleeting spark, a brief moment of, so that's how it is. But for someone with superior intuition, this is a constant state, a continuous stream of insight, never switched off. Jung wrote in Psychological Types, "The problem of the superior function lies not in itself, but in the way it separates the individual from the integrity of the collective." In other words, when you see too much, you no longer share the same reality as others. You enter a room, and while everyone else enjoys the atmosphere, you sense the hidden tension. You listen to a speech, and while the audience applauds, you notice the logical flaws. You read the news, and while the masses believe, you see the artificiality beneath. This is the price of the superior function. It turns you into an outsider in the collective game. To emphasize this, remember the case of Alan Turing. When the entire code-breaking team at Bletchley Park drowned in despair, Turing focused on the meaningless, repetitive signals others ignored. His superior intuition not only saw the pattern, but built an entirely different solution. He saved the world from Nazi Germany. But at the same time, his personal life was destroyed by society, and in the end, he died in solitude. The superior function can change history, but it can also destroy the one who carries it. Jung warned, when a superior function dominates the entire mind, the other three functions weaken. This creates an imbalanced state prone to psychological crises. Those hypersensitive to contradictions will struggle to enjoy peace. Those overly attached to intuition will lose stability in daily life. Another example is Van Gogh. His paintings exploded with colors, light, and strange connections that ordinary eyes could not see. But that very superior visual intuition accompanied relentless mental crises, leading to tragedy at the end of his life. Jung called this the curse of consciousness. Because once you see, you cannot pretend not to. You cannot return to the state of collective unconsciousness. You become the outcast within your own community. And this is only the conceptual part. When Jung's theory meets historical and modern scientific evidence, you will see why this superior perception is not merely a personal trait, but an evolutionary risk. What Jung warned about was not abstract theory. History has recorded people who carried the ability to see too much, and they all left behind painful traces. Modern science has also confirmed this phenomenon. Vincent van Gogh is a prime example. He saw the world with different eyes. Where others only saw a simple wheat field, Van Gogh saw the flow of energy and the movement of the universe. His paintings were vivid, radiant, beyond ordinary perception, but those eyes made him pay the price. Sensing too much, too intensely, Van Gogh lived in constant tension. Mental crises became more frequent, and in the end, that sensitivity led him to an irreversible tragedy. Virginia Woolf, one of the most important writers of the 20th century, suffered the same fate. She didn't just write novels, she exposed the entire psychological depth of human beings. Every glance, every silence, every small detail became material for her work. But that ability also drained Woolf. She carried within her the emotions of an entire world, unable to separate what belonged to others and what belonged to herself. Long episodes of depression, echoes in her mind that never stopped. That talent and sensitivity made Woolf one of the greatest writers, but also led her to death when she could no longer endure. Nikola Tesla, the genius of electricity, showed another form of sensitivity. He heard sounds others could not hear. He saw light as unbearably bright. He lived in a world where every stimulus was amplified many times over. Tesla described himself as someone who constantly had to avoid people because the energy they carried exhausted him. This hypersensitivity allowed him to create inventions that changed civilization, but it also left him in solitude. He died alone in a hotel room, a genius abandoned by society. Alan Turing is another figure on this list. His mathematical intuition surpassed all his colleagues. During World War II, when the entire world was stuck before the Enigma code, Turing saw repetitive structures no one else noticed. He invented the decoding machine, shortened the war, and saved millions of lives. But his personal life turned into tragedy. Instead of being honored, he was destroyed by society for his differences. In the end, he died alone, carrying with him a brain that saw more than the entire world combined. What do Van Gogh, Wolff, Tesla, and Turing have in common? They all carried the power to see deeper, to feel more, to detect what others missed, and they all paid a terrible price. Modern science confirms this is not coincidence. Research on mirror neurons shows that some brains empathize so strongly they recreate the emotions of others as if they were their own. Research on prediction error shows that some people constantly detect mismatches between reality and the brain's prediction model, making it impossible for them to ignore contradictions. Paul Ekman proved that certain individuals see micro-expressions majority completely miss. And Gary Klein, in his book Seeing What Others Don't, stated that insight, those moments of realizing hidden truth, often comes from contradictions, from unexpected connections, or in moments of desperation. In other words, both Jung and modern science point to one truth. There are people born to see more. But the price of seeing more is not always light. Sometimes it is isolation, crisis, and tragedy. If you see yourself in these stories, know that you are not alone. The greatest geniuses and artists in history have endured the same. The difference lies only in how they faced it and how they chose. And if you think there is someone out there who also needs to hear this truth, share the video. Perhaps that small act will help someone understand that their experience is not abnormal, but a part of human history. Jung never considered these people patients in the medical sense. He did not see them as broken or defective. On the contrary, he believed they carried within them a form of evolutionary potential. The problem was not in their ability to see more, but in how to survive with that ability. For decades, Jung developed a path so that those with superior perception would not be destroyed. He called it the path of individuation. It is not a therapeutic cure, but a process of survival. The first step Jung called discrimination. It sounds simple, but it is the greatest challenge. You must learn to distinguish which feelings and thoughts are your own and which are those you have absorbed from others. If you cannot do this, you will live like a mirror, reflecting everything but losing your own essence. Jung encouraged practicing separation in daily life. He asked patients to spend time alone each day, writing down their thoughts and emotions, tracing which truly belong to themselves. This is not a simple habit of journaling. It is a method of retrieving the fragments of the soul that were unconsciously given away to others. The second step is shadow integration. Those who see too much are often haunted by the darkness of others, by contradictions and deceptions around them. Jung realized the reason because they had not dared to face the darkness within themselves. The more they refused to see their own selfishness, anger, or ambition, the more they became obsessed when they saw these traits in others. Integrating the shadow does not mean letting it dominate. It means acknowledging, I also carry these elements within me. When you accept them as part of yourself, you are no longer shaken so strongly by their reflection in others. You are no longer dragged into cycles of anger, envy, or deceit because you have recognized their existence within yourself and you have placed them in their proper place. The final step, Jung called conscious participation. This is the complete opposite of merging unconsciously into the collective. Those with dangerous perception often fall into two extremes, either withdrawing from society to protect themselves or dissolving into the collective until they lose all boundaries. Both lead to destruction. Conscious participation means remaining connected with the community while keeping the integrity of the self. You do not run away and you do not lose yourself. You learn to be present among the collective while still knowing clearly what is me and what is the other. This is the hardest stage, but also the stage that turns a curse into strength. During his own crisis, Jung practiced this path. From 1913 to 1919, he endured visions and intense dreams. He wrote, He drew and he conversed with the figures in his own mind. Those records became the Red Book. It was not evidence of pathology, but a vivid illustration of how a person learns to dialogue with inner darkness instead of being devoured by it. Jung's solution never promised an easy life. It does not turn you into someone normal. It only provides a path to both carry dangerous perception and preserve your wholeness. Because in the end, the problem is not how much you see, but whether you have the strength to live with what you see. Carl Jung once observed hundreds of people who carried superior perception. The outcomes were not the same. Some were crushed by that variability. Others learned to integrate it and turned it into a gift for humanity. Friedrich Nietzsche is the example of collapse. He saw through the illusions of religion, morality, and society. His works were powerful, but also full of destructive fire. Nietzsche never found a way to balance what he saw. In the end, he fell into mental breakdown, lost the ability to communicate, and lived in solitude until he died. In contrast, Meister Eckhart, the medieval theologian and mystic, represents successful integration. He also saw what others could not, the deeper nature of consciousness and the presence of divinity within each human being. But Eckhart learned to transform. He used superior vision to bring wisdom, compassion, and spiritual guidance to the community. His sermons did not destroy, they uplifted. And what about Jung himself? He once stood on the edge of madness. Visions, dreams, and voices in his mind nearly drowned him. But instead of denying them or being consumed, he chose to dialogue. He wrote the Red Book. He observed, analyzed, and turned darkness into data. Jung did not escape by seeing less, but by learning to live with what he saw. That is the path of individuation. So what about you? If you carry this dangerous perception, there are two paths. Either you are destroyed by it, like Nietzsche, or you learn to integrate it and use it to serve, like Eckhart, like Jung. This is not an easy choice, but it is the only choice. Jung once wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." This statement is not an empty, inspirational slogan. It is a warning, and it is also a promise. Because becoming yourself is never a safe road. It is full of danger, full of solitude. But if you walk it with patience, it will turn the curse into strength. If what you heard in this video resonates with your experience, leave a comment. I see what others don't. It is not just a phrase. It is the first step in the journey of facing and accepting yourself. And if you want to continue walking the path Jung opened, hit subscribe. Each week we will go deeper into truths that the world is not ready to face, but you need to hear. Finally, if you think there is someone out there who is also suffering because they see too much, share this video with them. Perhaps it will be the reminder that they are not insane, they are not broken, they are simply carrying a gift that must be integrated.